Hello, my fellow kin. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another competitive list review. A big thank you to everyone who tuned in to the grand premiere of the Votann vs 40k Battle Report series that launched earlier last month. Got a lot of good positive feedback on it, good reception, and I'm really excited to bring you guys the next one real soon. On today's agenda, we'll be taking a look at the Sheffield 40k Super Major event held on the weekend of April 5th to 6th of this year. As always, we'll take a look at the Votann placings, discuss the matchups, the scores, do a deep dive list analysis, talk about some strengths and weaknesses, and of course contextualize the results of the placings by looking at some of the matchups. But before we go any further, of course, a massive thank you to our channel members. Jordan Stuckenschneider, The Pulp, Fusel, Sam P, Austria TM, Dabadakis, Travis Taylor, Aaron Easley, Smoking Miniatures, Mr. Wolf, Koromar, Chaos King Plays, Gregory Williams, Realist Chance, Ron Helton, Nicholas Dapp, Car X, Ham Sandwich, Droidiac, and Last Draken. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. It really does help me out a lot. And as we mentioned in the previous video, channel members do get to have an executive vote in terms of which armies we face on the channel, and additionally receive an exclusive post-game analysis. If you're interested in becoming a channel member, please check out the link down in the description below. And as always, a massive thank you. Now, as for today's video, we'll be taking a look at the Sheffield 40k Super Major event. The list in this episode was piloted by Greg Chamberlain, and it's been getting a lot of attention in our Discord server, which you could join free of charge by following the link down in the description below. Greg Chamberlain came 7th out of 214 players, taking home a 5-win, 0-draw, 1-loss score. Matchups included Votann at 77 versus Orc Warhorde at 76, Votann 98 versus Necron's Awakened Dynasty at 72, a 69-point victory for Votann versus Mordaka Orcs at 58, Votann 94 versus Tyrannid's Crusher Stampede at 56, an 85-point victory for Votann versus GSC Biosantic Blood Surge at 83, and then a Votann defeat at the last game, 51 versus Eldari Yanid at 63. So some pretty sweet victories here, a narrow defeat, and a pretty tight game 5 against GSC. Let's take a look at the list. An instant fan favorite this week for sure, as we dive into a very elite Hearthguard list running the Oathband detachment. We have 2 Ioneer champions, one of them equipped with Appraising Glare, the other with a Teleport Crest, to be leading a big 10-man brick of Ioneer Hearthguard equipped with Vulcanite Disintegrators and all the good weapons. We then have a second Ioneer champion with a Darkstar Axe just solo on the board. Next up, we have a Cal with the Grim Demeanor enhancement, and guess what this character is leading? Another big 10-man brick of Hearthguard with Vulcanite Disintegrators and all the good stuff for melee as well. So this is right out the gate, super interesting. Personally for myself, and I think just the meta as a whole, Hearthguard, especially big bricks of Hearthguard, have virtually just disappeared from the meta. We haven't seen something like this in quite some time, and I do think that this makes it a very unique style of list, which we'll discuss a little bit later. Moving along, we have just a single squad of Hearthkin Warriors, another unconventional choice here, whereas most other armies would typically run 2. We then have 2 Sagittars equipped with L7 missile launchers for some more long-range shooting. These are, of course, going to be splitting up our Hearthkin Warrior squads, in addition to transporting a 5-man unit of Chthonian Berserks equipped with the 3-damage Mauls. Next up, we have a 10-man brick of Chthonian Berserks with damage 3 Mauls, of course the Maul grenade launchers on both of these squads, and as we mentioned earlier, the heart of this list, 2 gigantic bricks of Ioneer Hearthguard, each one interestingly equipped with the Vulcanite Disintegrators. Our big 10-man Berserker brick, of course, will be riding in none other than a Hecaton Land Fortress with our standard loadout of SP Conversion Beamer and a Twin Bolt Cannon. Wrapping up the list, we then have a big footprint 6-man bike squad here for some extra shooting capabilities, and then of course the near mandatory inclusion of the 10-man Jaeger squad. Wow, this is a really interesting one. So I do have a lot of thoughts on this. As we said a little bit earlier, not something we see super often here, and I think there's a lot of interesting components that make people get excited about seeing something like this. The first standout one, of course, is we have not just like a squad of Hearthguard which have basically gone extinct. We're actually taking 2 gigantic bricks. So we've invested like 400 points in each one of these squads. Like 800 points of our list is just Hearthguard units coming down from deep strike, rapid ingressing, just having massive volumes of firepower and attacks, somewhat decent durability in the sense that they're a little bit more annoying to wound, supplemented with some additional damage like the damage 3 berserks, just a nice big 10-man brick riding around in a land fortress, also quite durable, and then a 6-man pioneer squad, which gives us pretty decent access to high rate of fire damage to weapons with some good extra AP, and of course some nice mobility as well. So I think looking at this list here, as we said, really high volume output. You have the big Hearthguard bricks. I am surprised they'll say that we are running the Vulcanites on both squads. I would have expected to see the one with the Cal taking the plasma guns, because you do get some extra value out of the lethal hits, out of Grim Demeanor as well here. The AP with Armor Contempt can't really be ignored in that case. The strength, maybe like -1 to wound, could be ignored as well. But undeniably, taking double Vulcanites on these 2 big bricks leads to a significant amount of output. You still are getting value. Someone pops -1 to hit if something has stealth. Maybe you're playing against Admech, for example, in the Hunter Cohort attachment, and you got to be able to kind of match that stat check of just, can you deal with a bunch of stealth units? Yes, this list can absolutely deal with that. So I do see the argument for taking that here, especially if your meta kind of demands that, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But ultimately here, really high volume output, good quality damage. We have the damage 3 on the mauls for the Berserker brick, a big 10-man unit, really annoying to deal with. We have our 2 big Hearthguard bricks, really annoying to deal with as well. Just massive amounts of shots with Blast, and the Vulcanites, it's 30 dev wound shots that are coming out, so you have the potential to get quite a few if you do roll hot. And then of course the inclusion of that little 6-man bike, just again, more high volume output. So with that said, I think this list has really strong primary presence. You're quite durable. If you do get on a point, you just like rapid ingress onto one if your opponent didn't block you out, or you just deep strike and walk up onto it. I do actually think that it's tough for a lot of armies to maybe deal with this kind of pressure, right? This kind of presence. It's relatively high durability on a lot of your different units here that are going on to objectives. Like we said, very elite, very strong, and I did mention that I feel like this is a little bit more meta relevant. I do think something like this is actually quite decent into DACA works, especially because we're like hitting these weird thresholds of like the toughness 6, -1 to wound. We do have like access to Armor Contempt, things like that. We're saving on 2s. So we are leaning into kind of like a stronger defensive profile here, and not something that could very easily just be picked up off the board in a shooting phase. So there is some actual commitment that's needed. You're going to have to send probably 2 activations at least to deal with any one of these threats, for most armies anyway. So I can see why this was taken in an era where up until today, where DACA just got nerfed, this would be something that probably does stand quite a good chance at beating that list. Like I said, in a lot of ways, it's sort of like our version of a pressure list. You have this big land fortress. It's like a land raider profile defensively. You have the 2 Hearthguard bricks. You have the big Berserk brick. It's just like you're putting things on objectives. You're pressuring your opponent's lines, pushing them back with these really tough units to shift that just absolutely obliterate whatever they see on the table. And if your opponent's army can't really match something like this, you do come out ahead. And then lastly, of course, kind of in line with all of this, why I think it works is that it's just so unconventional. People probably don't have a lot of practice into some kind of list like this. The design choices that were made here, just having like really few activations for Votann generally. Like you could get up to like 22 activations in a list. This one is significantly smaller, but everything here just really packs a punch. Now, that said, I do think there are some pretty standout weaknesses. I think that this list is really bad at doing a trade war. Naturally, you only have 1 warrior squad, so you can only afford to do maybe like 1 or 2 turns max of like low pressure on the table, just trying to trade units out on objectives, deny primary, force your opponent to send something out. And then you kind of just have to have a go turn. In a lot of ways, this reminds me of a CSM list, because you're kind of just putting something out there, turn 1 to try to like get some tougher things to move around the table, and then you do your go turn, you send everything all in and just try to dominate one flank on the table. So I think in a lot of ways, because of that, it suffers from trade wars. If somebody does get to force you into one, this list will probably struggle to get out. On a similar note, I also think that by the nature and design of the list, it is significantly slower than some of these other ones we see going around with like 6 Sagittars, for example, or really just like heavily mechanized lists, a lot of bikes. Once these Hearthguard bricks land, they aren't really going anywhere. So you do get them down, try to get them on an objective, get them close to one. They do end up pushing out onto it, and then that is probably where they live and die. Or maybe you rapid ingress them down on your opponent's flanks, right on their line, and try to just pin them back as much as possible. I think another consideration I have here, again, more of a question, I put a question mark here, is like, how does this list deal with something like knights? I'm kind of struggling to see a world where you're able to actually pick up high toughness targets. Like, is the intent here to play it kind of like Creations of Bile, where you're just trying to tag as many of the knights as you can, and then they can't really deal with you, you're move blocking them, they can't get around the table, and then in return, you're probably struggling to kill them as well, but you will slowly whittle them down, of course, with your inconsistent, albeit quite high damage profile in melee. So I do wonder how it deals with higher toughness armies. I would have liked to see maybe the score would have looked like if the pilot played into like knights, for example, which are doing quite well at the moment. So just some consideration. Maybe I'm completely wrong here and it handles that no problem. I'd just love to hear some thoughts on how the pilot thinks that matchup would go down. And then, of course, my other question is, how does this list deal with other kinds of pressure lists? Let's say he's playing against, again, Creations of Bile, a really powerful list and menace right now in the meta, I think, and one that is quite popular. Some other armies just pressure a lot better naturally. And so I'd be curious to hear the pilot's thoughts as well, how he feels that matchup would go, and if he feels he has a decent chance to come out ahead and take the victory. So really interesting list. Like I said, super creative, not something we see all the time. I think it catches people off guard. When you conventionally think about what Votann like to do, it's usually just be very quick, have a lot of midboard presence, and send a lot of cheap things out to die, and then trade up because of your judgment tokens. This list does kind of fight in the middle, of course, naturally. It's Votann, but we don't usually see such a heavy investment here in so many hammer units. And I think that this is an interesting idea for a list, an interesting concept, and I'm curious to see if this starts a new trend. So real quick, just a couple matchups I want to talk about here. Looking at the pairings, Game 1 was extremely close into Orc Warhorde. This was actually one of the scores that surprised me the most here because I would be inclined to think that this list performs quite well into Orcs, especially if you're building it expecting Daka Daka to be a prevalent army to face against at this event, which we do see later on. The list does quite well into it. I was surprised to see that with access to so much blast, so much high volume of attacks, that the list struggled to take care of Warhorde. However, I will say that something that does make a lot of sense here is that because we've traded off a lot of our utility pieces, a lot of our screening tools that we have to kind of just play board control and stop yourself from getting hit by a hyper-aggressive army, like potentially Orc Warhorde when they pop their Wa, maybe that's the reason why it becomes a little bit tougher to control the flow of the game when you have fewer resources and pieces available to play with. So potentially, like I'm just thinking back to my game I had against Pete on the channel for our bat rep. I feel like if I did not get the ability to pin him one turn in his DZ or at least stop access for 2 turns on an objective, I probably would have got steamrolled. So having those pieces in your list, I think, go a long way. And potentially that might be what happened here. I'd be curious to hear, of course, the pilot's thoughts on this matchup. Did it come down to who got first turn? Did it come down to an unlucky go turn? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Another game that I thought was pretty interesting where we really see the power of this list shine is into Necron's Awakened Dynasty. That 20-man warrior brick is gone the second something bats an eye at it. And I think that's what's pretty cool about this list is that you just have such high rate of fire that anything that's like a 1 wound unit just crumbles, especially if you end up wounding it on 2s or even on 3s. It just collapses. And that's really what you're getting here with access to blast. You're probably shooting out over 50, 60, 70 shots with your blast profile with one 10-man Hearthguard brick, forcing your opponent to just take so many ridiculous saves you clear the table instantly. You can even split fire quite effectively as well with this brick because just access to blast 4 on a single guy means half the squad will get natively 20 extra shots, and that alone could be enough with their dev wound gun to actually just wipe out a 20-man brick of warriors. You can effectively bring a 10-man Hearthguard brick down on the table, have half of them shoot into the 20-man warrior brick, and the other half pick up like 2 other units on the board as well. So you just get a lot of value out of this unit, especially in matchups where it's a lot of single wound, low toughness units, like horde armies and things like that. The other game I think was interesting is into Eldari, and we see here the scores are both quite low at 51 to 63, and I think the reason for that is that Votann generally trades quite well into Eldari. And I'm of the opinion, in the few games that I've gotten to play against them, that if you can force them into a trading war where you put cheap things out and they have to put more expensive units out to deal with it, the game's going to go in your favor generally. And I think this is where the list kind of struggles, as we discussed a little bit earlier with the weaknesses. It just doesn't have the tools to engage in that kind of a fight. And you have to put expensive units out yourself. And the problem is that Eldari output, when they have their goal turner, when they bring a unit out, is just much more efficient and effective. There are so many units in the Eldari list that just look at a 10-man Hearthguard brick and delete it. Now, conversely, and this is not an exaggeration, this also means your 10-man Hearthguard brick in return can probably pick up like 4 units of elves if you get a full activation with it and really good angles on something. And I know this from experience because I tested it out and it worked and it was pretty funny. So I think that there is potential here for a really volatile damage dealing match here, where it's really just like who can table who first, because you have to bring out expensive units. You can't stall the game. So the fight happens quite quickly and it's going to happen quite hard. And I think it ultimately just comes down to which army can fight a little bit better. And I feel like that is more favored with Eldari in this case. But I could be completely wrong on this, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Or if the pilot watches this video, let us know in the comments below. The last game here is GSC Biosantic Broodsurge. That really interested me as well because the score is so tight at 85 to 83. I would have expected to see the Votann score a little bit higher here, although I'll admit I don't have much experience into the army either. How do you guys think this one went? Let me know in the comments down below. So a really interesting list here. It's gotten a lot of hype in the Discord channel. Everybody's talking about it. Hearthguard are back, baby. Let's go. And a massive congratulations to Greg Chamberlain for not only coming 7th place out of 214 players, which is a massively impressive feat, and of course for reinvigorating a lot of love for Hearthguard, which I think have unfortunately fallen out of flavor. Hopefully this is enough to get people excited about them again and maybe testing some new creative lists out. As always, if you enjoyed this kind of content, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment for me down below. A massive, massive thank you, of course, to our channel members who help support the channel and help make these videos possible. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about the Leagues of Votann, consider joining our community Discord server free of charge, link in the description below. And of course, for all your miniature needs, feel free to check out the sponsor of our channel, Card Brawlers, using the affiliate link down in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.